Good morning, fifth grade. It is Wednesday, and we are going to do our language lesson today in pages 284 through 286. So that seems like a lot, but it's actually not a lot. It's more of me describing a few things, and then you go ahead and reading a little bit of it. So let's get started. So if you were to look at page 284, it's going to talk about diagramming complements. Now, diagramming complements, there's two ways to do it, okay? So first of all, remember that if we have a direct object, it is receiving the action, okay? So let's look at the blue box, number 1, and I'm going to show you how this works. Okay, so first we have, when we're diagramming just the direct object with our subject and verb, we remember that on this side we have our subject, this we would have our verb. So pretend like that doesn't exist for a minute. That would be how we start our normal diagramming process, right? Well, when we have a direct object, we then add it with a horizontal line, and then we add it at the end, okay? So if you were to look at number 1, it says Toronto won the race. So we would have Toronto as our subject, won is the verb, and then we have race is our direct object. Now, it says the race, so we know that we would go ahead and put our little line here and put the on it because all of our articles go underneath, right? A and the go underneath, okay? So, pretty simple when it comes to just add the direct object right after the verb because remember, it's receiving the action from the verb. Makes sense, right? Okay, now let's go with indirect object. Now remember, the indirect object, and let me recap that for you because that might help you to remember. Oop, I went back too many pages, sorry. Okay, so the indirect object is basically located between the verb and the direct object, okay? And it answers the question like to whom, for whom, to what, for what, okay? The verb is being done. So remember, it's still from the verb, but it's between the direct object and the verb. So that's why we would have subject, verb, direct object, and then it's coming off of the verb, okay? Remember, this is kind of like a prepositional phrase, but we don't write anything on this horizontal line, and then we go straight and we give our indirect object there. So let's take a look at number 2 in the box. It says, the Lone Ranger taught the rustler a lesson, okay? So we have, what is our verb? Taught, right? And then what is our subject? Lone Ranger. And then what did the Lone Ranger teach? He taught the lesson, right? And to whom did he teach the lesson to? That would be the rustler right here. And then underneath that, we would have our diagonal, which would be the, okay, for the rustler. So do you see how we're going ahead and diagramming that just a little bit differently? We have direct object comes right after verb, and we have indirect objects comes off of verb, kind of like a prepositional phrase, and because it is in between that verb and that direct object, okay? So now let's move on to number 3, which is predicate nominative. Okay, so predicate nominative and predicate adjective, you also can diagram. Now remember, we always start our diagram off with subject and verb. Now the difference here is that with predicate nominative and predicate adjective, they actually diagram exactly the same. However, a little bit different from the direct object. Okay, remember, you can't have a predicate nominative or predicate adjective with a direct object because you have a linking verb. Remember, that's how we get those two. So, do you see how this is a diagonal line, not a straight vertical line? That's how you have to diagram the predicate nominative and predicate adjective. You don't put that straight line, and let me show you back up here. See how this one is straight? Okay, you can't do that when it comes to this. It has to have that diagonal, and that's what makes the difference, so that you know one is the direct object or the other is the predicate adjective or the predicate nominative. Okay, so take a look at number 3, and it says the Lone Ranger is a hero. So we would put our verb, linking verb of is, and then we would have Lone Ranger, right? And what is the Lone Ranger? Well, he is a hero, right? And so we're renaming him, right? That was predicate nominative, not describing him. We're renaming him. So the Lone Ranger is a hero, so that would be predicate nominative. We would then put our diagonal line, and then of course, because this is a hero, we would go ahead and put our A underneath the hero part, okay? Then we have predicate adjective. Toronto is loyal. Now, Toronto, I believe, is a horse, okay? So Toronto is loyal. So we have our linking verb of is, right? And then we have our subject, Toronto. And what is Toronto? Well, he's loyal. Now, that's describing Toronto, right? So he would be our predicate adjective, and that would be right here on the line. Remember, don't forget that horizontal line, and then we would write loyal on the line. So do you see how that's kind of going with diagramming? Now, obviously, we will be diagramming these, I think in the next lesson, but not right now. We did want to go ahead and describe that for you. Okay, so as far as page 285 goes, we just completed 284. I want you to think back and read through all of this. Now, this is just how to learn the procedure of identifying the complement. So really, this is just doing those same things I've been teaching you on asking you who or what and how to figure that all out. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and read through on page 285, and then you turn over to page 286 and you continue reading in the green box, okay? Once you get done with that, then you can click back onto this and we will continue with the last portion of 286, think. So press pause now. Okay, so now we are on to think on page 286. Now this says, following the 5 steps that you basically just read before, okay? If you can find the correct subject and verb and the complement for these sentences, then your teacher, for these sentences as your teacher reads the steps. Okay, I apologize. I want you to go ahead and find all of these things. So what we're gonna do is we're going to double underline our verb, we're going to single underline our subject, and we're going to identify by writing above that words either IO for indirect object, DO for direct object, PN for predicate nominative, or PA for predicate adjective, okay? So let's start with number 1. My grandparents sent me money in my birthday card. So now let's take a look. What do we have? Do we have a linking verb or do we have an action verb? We do have an action verb. It's sent. So double underline sent. Now who did the sending? The grandparents. So grandparents is our subject. So we underline grandparents 1 time. Then we're going to ask ourselves, what did they send? They sent money. Now money is going to be our direct object, so put DO above money. Now whom did they send the money to? They sent the money to me. I would like them to send me some money. Okay, they sent it to me. So we would put IO above me as our indirect object because that was who was receiving the money, right? Okay, so take a look. Did you get that down? Awesome. Okay, so then we have number 2. Melissa Johnson lives across the street from me. So now let's take a look. What is our verb? Is it a linking verb or is it an action verb? It's an action verb and it is lives. So we would double underline lives. Okay, now who lives? Melissa Johnson. Okay, so Melissa Johnson lives. So we would double or we would single underline Melissa Johnson as our subject. Okay, so now we have to ask ourselves, what does she live? Well, I don't see really a subject. I mean, she lives across the street. Wait a minute, freeze, time out. Remember, what is the word across? It's a prepositional phrase. So across the street is a prepositional phrase. That means we don't have an indirect object, we don't have a direct object, we don't have a predicate nominative because we had an action verb, and we don't have a predicate adjective because we had an action verb. So guess what? Across the street is a prepositional phrase. We don't do anything unless you want to put your little parentheses around it to remember that. And then what about from me? Oh, from me, that's also a prepositional phrase. You're right, because from is a prepositional word. So we could put the little parentheses around from me as well. So in this sentence, we have no direct object, indirect object, or predicate nominative or predicate adjective. So we just double underline lives and single underline Miss Melissa Johnson. Okay, now look at number 3. The dog in their yard is a friendly collie. Okay, so what is our verb? Do we have any actions or do we have any linking verbs? Okay, we have is. Is a linking verb. So double underline is. Now, what is? Oh, the dog is, right? Okay, so single underline dog. Now, let's ask ourselves, what is the dog? The dog is, okay, friendly, yes, but it's also a collie. So is friendly, oh, it's an adverb, you're right. So friendly is actually modifying collie. But is collie modifying dog? It is. It's actually renaming the dog, right? Because we know the name of the dog is collie, or it's a type of dog. So we would then put PN above collie because PN, our predicate nominative, renamed dog, right? Okay, good. Number 4, my mother is happy most of the time. Okay, so what is our verb? Is it a action verb or a linking verb? You're right, it's a linking verb because it's is, right? So is, we double underline is, and who is? Mother, right? So single underline mother. And then ask yourself, what is mother? Oh, what is she? She's happy, you're right. Well, happy, is that renaming mother or is that describing mother? It's describing mother. So we know that that is PA for predicate adjective, and we would write that above happy, and we would know that happy is describing mother. Okay? Number 5. The strawberry pie at Shoney's restaurant tastes delicious. Okay, guess what, friends? Shoney's is actually Bob's Big Boy. Okay, so back in the South, Mr. Lawler goes to Shoney's, and that is what they call it back there when he grew up. But then out here, we called it Bob's Big Boy. So anyway, kind of funny, right? So when he says he wants to go to Bob's Big Boy, Mr. Lawler actually says, let's go to Shoney's. And then we all laugh because we know he means Bob's Big Boy. And that confused my mom for a while, but after a while, she got it. Anyway, so now we have the strawberry pie at Shoney's restaurant tastes delicious. So now let's take a look. What is our verb? Do we have an action verb or do we have a linking verb? Guess what? Where is it at? Tastes. We have a linking verb. So tastes, double underline tastes, and then go ahead and tell me, what is the tasty thing? Pie, right? So single underline pie. Now, the pie tastes what? Delicious, you're right. So now is delicious describing the pie or renaming the pie? It's describing the pie. So that would be PA for predicate adjective. And so now you have PA above delicious, and you are now learning your indirect object, direct object, predicate nominative, predicate adjective, and now I'm hungry for strawberry pie. Are you? Anyway, I hope you guys are understanding all of this. This is your language lesson for today, and I will see you with language tomorrow. Call me or text me or email me or tell me anything blooms me. Contact me anyway if you're having any questions about this. We will be going through it more and more. So if you do understand or you're kind of right there, make sure when you reach out to me, you know exactly what your questions are so we can go over them. But I have a feeling you'll get this as we go along. But I think you guys are doing a great job, so keep it up.